Last April, cybercriminals successfully launched a ransomware attack on Colonial Pipeline Company, crippling its operations and creating a short-term fuel crisis in the eastern United States. In May, the president signed an executive order on cybersecurity across all supply chains. Clearly, we have a problem, and one that has not gone unnoticed in the White House, as the White House has identified cybersecurity as a key national security concern. Welcome to Global Sourcing Insights from CIPS. This program is a co-production of CIPS Americas and the Michigan State University Eli Broad College of Business. With me today are Kenneth Sullivan. He is CEO of Microcraft, and Microcraft specializes in the manufacture and assembly of parts for various facets of the aerospace industry. Microcraft is one of the nation's oldest and most respected producers of wind tunnel models, flight demonstrators, prototype research hardware, and specialized test equipment. Kenneth, welcome to the program. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks, Bob. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. And we also have Chris Peters. He is CEO of the Lucrum Group, and the Lucrum Group is a consulting firm that helps improve the design, assembly, and coordination of complex manufacturing supply chains. Its focus is on engineering-centric industries such as aerospace and defense. Chris, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate the opportunity.
And of course, joining me is Bill Michaels. He's VP of Operations of CIPS Americas. Bill, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Bob. Looking forward to this discussion.
Excellent. So let's jump right in here. Kenneth, you're a defense contractor, and Microcraft would seem to be a likely target for cyber attacks as in the defense industry. Without giving away any information that might be valuable to a criminal, how important is cybersecurity to your organization? What kind of resources or visibility can you describe that demonstrate the priority it has within Microcraft?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it obviously has top priority because of the type of data we handle, and we work with various companies in the government directly. We have to go to great lengths to make sure that there's reducing the leak paths of getting data. You're trying to get data. Like all our equipment is offline. There's no Bluetooth. There's not on the web. You basically, when we have to order new equipment, we have to strip it down, if you will. So that is one thing we do. Also, you train your employees. There's just over and over and over again of here's what we have. And then cell phones being introduced as offers a leak path opportunity, if you will. But let's say we go to great lengths to separate, put a air gap between the data and the outside world, if you will. So, and the biggest thing is is what you want to get down, really where you're driving to is where it's basically where your employees are your highest risk of, you try to do as much technology you can, but then trying to manage the employee to make sure that whether it's intentional or not, that, you don't have a leak of data. And that's through training, education. But the main thing is it has to come from the top. And I'm ultimately responsible for it. And then all our senior managers are just drilled into them. This is, we've got to make sure we protect our customer data.
Yep. Wow. So, Chris, let's get you into the conversation here. Go ahead and unmute yourself. As the saying goes, even paranoids have enemies. So are the concerns that Kenneth raised here really relevant? Why should we be worried about cybersecurity across the supply chain right now?
The concerns are very relevant, and there are a lot of issues. In this day that we have of Industry 4.0 and increased connectivity between suppliers, the cybersecurity risks increase significantly. The large companies, the prime defense contractors, for instance, they do a great job of protecting their environments, of making sure that organizations can't penetrate and get at that data. But if you start to go further down the supply chain to the small and medium-sized manufacturers that may be many tiers below, they're much more susceptible. And if I can get into those companies and use them then as an entry to work my way up the supply chain into the higher level companies, the prime contractors, that presents tremendous danger.
So the real issue, and for many companies, for the big companies, is upstream. Their suppliers and their suppliers up in the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. When you get to small operations who are not really thinking so much about cybersecurity, is that more or less the case?
That's exactly right. And it's not necessarily that those small to medium-sized manufacturers aren't thinking about it. It's hard not to pick up a newspaper or to look at an online article without reading about the risks of ransomware and cyber attacks and everything else. So they're aware of it, but they don't have the resources often to address it. They don't have the people, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the monies to be able to address it, especially in manufacturing environments, which are much more complex and vulnerable than traditional IT environments.
Well, there you go, Kenneth. You're one of those companies. You're part of a significant multi-tiered supply chain. What are the significant worry points for you when it comes to cybersecurity? I'm thinking of trying to coordinate your efforts with your customers' efforts and also your own suppliers.
It's kind of like, do you want to list the top 10? Would be my response. But a lot of it is concerned with you don't know what you don't know, and you can you go through and until they get CMMC in place where people are certified by a third party. Right now, it's you're taking a company at their word. That is what is scary, and you want to have vetted companies. Far as we've done a pretty good job of not buying foreign like electronics or materials or different things like that, or computers. And we went through and changed all our computers a couple of years ago because of and that wasn't cheap at all. And then had to set up the company where we could basically still have access, but also control the data within, and make sure we have the type of controls on that. So the companies have got the guy at the top, or the management team, really the guy at the top, has got to be responsible for it. You cannot subcontract it out. You cannot go get a consultant to come in and put a certificate on your wall. It's 24/7, 365. You got to do it every day, and you're always looking at what are the leak paths, how can data potentially get out, and trying to circumvent those.
In that respect, one of the trends I'm seeing is really the integration and automation of business systems as we look at the supply chains, and we're starting to see our accounts payable, purchase to pay systems get integrated. We're starting to see some planning systems get integrated, and as we see that integration, we're starting to see people get concerns about crypto mining or phishing and fraud. Are we more vulnerable now, and how can companies protect themselves against the people that are phishing and trying to get some information, especially to employees, as you said, Ken, who are maybe not aware as they should be? Because I've had some clients that haven't had some fraud go through the P2P system. Suppliers enter the system, enter their invoices, and planning. We're starting to use the Internet of Things. So I'd like your comments on those.
Sure, we keep those on separate systems. Is the way we handle that. Main thing we're focused on is technical data. That's our main thing. I've said 100 times, I'll publish our company's financials on the front page of the Wall Street Journal before I let my customers' data get out. That's just the mentality you have to have. So we have to look at separating those systems and firewalling them, air gapping, if you will. And then, far as the phishing, there again, that goes back to training. And we've been very blessed that our IT group has done a good job, and our security group's done a good job of training, so that when we see something, we know to send it to our IT, or we've got a spam system email set up where we send it to that, and they go through and do the make sure it gets blocked, and we don't respond to it. But thank goodness we've had very few incidences.
Well, it is amazing that the phishing has gone into text messaging, into phones. I know I'm getting pretty regular fake messages from my wireless supplier. So you really have to keep thinking. This is a whack-a-mole kind of project, isn't it? Because every time you have a new technology or a new idea, there's a new way to try to get around it or try to extract a password or fool you in some way.
Right, and it keeps you up. And I'll say it's continuously, being on your game, and we're by no means perfect at all, but we try to keep our guys up to date on training, reminders, send out memos, emails, or whatever, and say, hey guys, here's what's going on. If there's a new some type of phishing coming down the pipe, we send out and say, hey guys, here's what's happening. Be aware, watch this at home, tell your spouse, all these things. So it is it's 24/7, 365.
The other thing that's changing too is this whole idea of social engineering is getting much more sophisticated. Several years ago, you could easily tell, well, this is a fake message because of the misspellings or because the topic is nothing that is of interest to you. But today, they're getting much more precise. The language is proper. The topics are things that are relevant to you. They're coming in through contacts that you know. So it's getting harder and harder to distinguish what might actually be a fraudulent message versus what is real.
So Chris, are they profiling people to figure out which message might get through the system?
Absolutely. And tools like LinkedIn and Facebook are key means to get at a lot of that information. It's one of the reasons that in defense and intelligence agencies, many people that work in sensitive fields are encouraged not to engage in social media because they become a key tool for gathering information that helps in social engineering.
Wow. So Chris, maybe you could start here. What are the most obvious mistakes that companies make or the vulnerabilities that they most often overlook? Is there a top 10? I know it's an ever-changing list because these things are it's ever evolving, but right now, what do you see that maybe we don't know about yet?
So there are a couple that I usually highlight because I focus heavily on OT, operations technology, the plant floor, the shop floor, those kind of things. And that's very different from business systems. Like Kenneth was mentioning before, it's one of the reasons that a lot of companies separate them. But in OT or operations technology, there's some common practices that we have that can increase our risk. For instance, if I'm running a line that is producing hot steel or some kind of product that I need to be able to shut it down quickly, it's very common for somebody to put the password for that system, tape it to that station. So if I have to shut it down quickly to save somebody's life or to reduce the amount of product lost, I can't go running around looking for a password. So that's a common practice. We need to figure out ways around that. But the bigger issue is when you think about vulnerabilities. I talked to a company the other day. I spend a lot of my time with small to medium-sized manufacturers. I talked to a medium-sized manufacturer recently. They have 23 different operating systems on their shop floor. Every version of DOS, 3 different versions of DOS, and all these other operating systems. You can't patch those. You can't apply antivirus to those systems. And those represent capital investments. To replace them would cost a lot of money. And even if I did replace them, a lot of systems that ship today, state-of-the-art, $300,000, $400,000 systems, still come with old operating systems. You can't even buy the new operating system. So all of those kind of things represent vulnerabilities. And for a lot of companies to take advantage of Industry 4.0, you do have the business systems, the IT systems connected to the OT systems or the operations technology systems. That connection and those vulnerabilities represent a tremendous risk. And that's where we've been raising a lot of awareness.
Kenneth, tell us about the particular challenges that a small and medium-sized enterprise has in facing the cybersecurity issues.
Sure. First of all, it depends on what type of data you are protecting. If it's, what type of regulations you have, which we should protect all intellectual property the same, is my opinion. However, they do not. It's mainly the DoD's got the lead on it. And I know that the automotive has talked about it, and I understand that also commercial aerospace. It's one of those deals that we're focusing people are either going to be DoD suppliers or they're not, because of cybersecurity costs. Like I mentioned before, we spent tens of thousands of dollars replacing laptops. When we buy our equipment, we have to pay to have it stripped down, if you will. Different types of business systems for where they are, how they're set up, how they're structured, and it may take a little more time to set up a project or definitely we have what I call sneaker net to take the technical data down to the machine. So that takes time. So it's it can be very expensive, and right now it just comes out of our overhead. So what that does, that makes us non-competitive in commercial industries when you do that, because we also have to have the personnel. The biggest recurring cost is personnel, and we do have a CISSP. Our IT director, is CISSP, and we also have his deputy is trained to get that. And then, like, if you have facility security, you have to have a facility security officer. So there's that just all goes to overhead, and it's very expensive to maintain that labor on that, and it basically takes you out of the running for commercial. Commercial would love to have it, but they're not going to pay for it at this point in time. That's why we're all for CMMC get going, because right now, like I say, it's up to the person or to the organization to say, well, we meet AS 800-171, so we're good to go.
Yep.
And that's what they do. And we've been monitoring CMMC. Chris and I are both involved with the NDI manufacturing division. My IT director is also in NDIA, and also participate in manufacturing and cybersecurity. So we try to stay up to date as best we can. But here again, it's you don't know what you don't know, and you're trying to outthink these guys at all possible. And so the biggest thing we do is keep our employees trained and minimize leak paths as much as we can.
So, Kenneth, do you have the operating systems issue that Chris talked about, where you have different operating systems? Have you tried to upgrade, or are you trying to solve that by just isolating or air gapping, as you call it, those machines or those operating systems, so you isolate them from any tampering?
We use air gap. It's impossible to, there's all kinds of patch things you can do, but the problem is it slows down the machine when you do that. So there's IT and there's OT, and Chris is dead on. People can handle IT real well because they understand you need to do an upgrade. OT, that's a different ballgame. You're talking about $500,000, $1 million machine, and it's different. It's not the same. System's not used the same way. So that is, that's where the government needs to understand that, because if they wave their magic wand and assume it and use the IT rules on OT, we're going to shut down the industrial base.
Yeah. So is this one? This is a question for the politicians, Washington, that maybe we should be analyzing. So actually, Chris, can you talk a little bit about the organizations? Are there organizations that are looking at this? I think Kenneth referred to some of them, and standards for cybersecurity that are being developed. Where does that stand right now? The quality of the organizations and the certifications and standards.
Sure. So there are a number of organizations looking at these issues, starting with NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. They were tasked by the White House probably about 8 years ago or so to come up with a standard to address cybersecurity. And that's how they led to the NIST special publication 800-171 that Kenneth had referenced before. That NIST publication 800-171 becomes the foundation for a lot of the other certifications. Kenneth has mentioned CMMC. That's the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, largely being pushed by the Department of Defense right now, but also being looked at by other agencies as well. And then you have other standards that come into play. IPC is a large trade association for the electronics industry, probably the largest in the world. And they publish a number of different standards. One of those is IPC 1791. And part of what they do is it provides a third-party validation of conformance to that NIST special publication that I mentioned before. So there are a number of different organizations that do this. Some, like NIST, span all industries and are global. Some like IPC are focused in certain industries, and there are other ones for automotive and others as well. But when it comes to cybersecurity, a lot of these are still in the early stages. We still have a long ways to go to develop the standards and get them adopted to help address these issues, again, especially on the OT or operations technology side of things.
Hey, Bob,
Go ahead, Bill.
As we come to, the end of our time, I've got one question that I'm really curious about with our experts. I read a book that Ted Koppel wrote about the grid going down. What keeps you guys up at night? So I'd like to hear.
Kenneth, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh boy. I guess what keeps me up at night is really being able to keep business going while we're investing in cybersecurity. We're losing work because until they get CMMC in place and you have to show certification, I bet the house that there's a lot of people that are loosely interpreting 800-171 and getting work from the government. And that is just my opinion, but I do know we lose some of the jobs we've lost to other companies. They are nowhere near implementing as much as we are. There's no way. And that's what keeps me up at night is if they don't get this going soon, people are going to get, I know they like to talk about, well, let's do dual things and dual type of technology and stuff like that. Until everybody gets on board, you're going to have DoD suppliers and everybody else, because you cannot afford to do commercial work when you're investing in trying to do what is right. And and as long as the customers continue to do the trend they're doing, go with the lowest bidder no matter what, it's where we are.
So we have vulnerable supply chains and people's lives are at risk.
Yep.
Okay.
And two of the things that really stand out for me, one is that we are so heavily reliant on our small to medium-sized manufacturers, not just for defense work, but for commercial work as well. This is an incredible resource that helps us increase and maintain our economic strength and our national defense strength. But yet we are putting the burden on those small companies to take on organized crime and nation state actors that are perpetrating these cybersecurity events. So I really think there's an opportunity for us to do something, maybe a grand challenge that would help some organization develop a solution that can be implemented by these small to medium-sized manufacturers at low risk and low cost, and maybe even subsidize some of that so that we help protect that national infrastructure. That's an issue that has really been concerning. And then the second thing is, because the United States is such an open society, we make everything available. All the transactions for government purchases, all that information is made available. You can go and find out who's producing landing gear for the F-16 or other weapon systems. And that information provides a blueprint into where to go if you're going to achieve certain objectives in an attack, especially if you're a nation state. So how do we maintain that transparency that we want in our society, but yet protect those assets so that we have confidence that somebody isn't stealing it, there isn't malicious insertion or tampering of our data, and that we can rely on that industrial base when we need to.
Wow, that's a big problem. And it sounds like we have a dual issue here for Kenneth, because on the one hand, he's losing work, so he's jeopardizing his business because we have standards that people are not necessarily following. But it also sounds like we've got a time bomb ticking there if we have companies that say they're meeting the standards but really aren't. So it's a dual issue, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've been in more than one company that where they claim, well, they've been certified in 800-171, and says, well, that's interesting, and they'll show the certificate where some snake oil salesman came in and evidently looked at their system and said, oh, you're compliant. Well, like I said, 24/7, 365 every day. You cannot have a consultant be accountable for your cybersecurity it's got to be in-house. It's got to be the guy that sits in my chair, and that's how you do it. And it is, and far as the supply chain, the government has got to take ownership. It is their supply chain. It is not the OEMs. It is theirs. They have got to step up to the plate, and they've also got to just drive it. They are responsible. You cannot delegate that. That's provide for the common defense. That is in the that's what they got to do, and you can't just say, oh well, you take care of it. Well, turning the other way is not the way to handle cybersecurity. You have to constantly look at it and continue to drive it home every day.
So are Lockheed and Boeing and the major Raytheon, I can't think of other tier one defense contractors, but those sorts of levels, are they giving you some kind of help? Are they giving you any kind of direction, Kenneth, in giving you assistance in meeting and actually sticking to the standards that we ought to have?
Yeah, and it flows. This the contracts will flow down. That's what they tell us. Here's where we need to be at, and we need to keep put our number in, like in registration. Here's where we say we are our score, and that's pretty much the extent of it.
Wow.
I think this is an area that there's a missed opportunity. For many years, large companies have sent out teams to help their suppliers improve quality, reduce error rates, all those kind of things. We need to see the same kind of effort with those large suppliers that have much greater resources than do the small to medium size. Reach out and help their suppliers, whether it's sending a team in to help them understand these issues, or maybe it is giving them access to a common portal where that sensitive data is shared and maintained so that it doesn't go into the native systems for those suppliers, reducing the amount of risk they have.
Right. Yeah, and that'd be a good idea. The big thing is they need to make sure that that each OEM don't turn into anything you can do, I can do better. And they all of a sudden, they start taking CMMC and then plus, well, this is, Acme's version. This is, Billy Bob's Shop's version or whatever. It needs to be a standard, one standard, and you are held accountable to that. And that's what it needs to be.
A great example of something like that is ExoStar, a company that's been around for a while, that provides connections between a number of the large defense manufacturers and the small to medium-sized companies. And the members of ExoStar, these large companies, have agreed to accept certain standards so that if I'm a small manufacturer, I log into ExoStar once, plug in my information, and that information is then shared, made available to all of my large defense primes. So I don't have to do it multiple times, and I don't face the issue that Kenneth just raised, where each one has a different form or different data requirements. They've all agreed to a standard approach, and they all accept what I put into the ExoStar system.
So one of the things that we've really seen lately is ransomware, which is a very specific kind of cyber attack. And I know there's always new ones coming up, but that's one that can really, as we've seen, it can shut down whole systems. Chris, what is the danger of that, and is there any solution to it?
Ransomware is insidious. You hit the nail on the head. It is not uncommon for it to shut down an entire system, maybe an operating line in a plant, which can shut down that plant. But if that plant is shut down, then that's going to have an impact on a supply chain. And if there were a coordinated attack across an industry, that could actually impact the economic viability of an entire region or country. So ransomware can have tremendous impact. I think we're only seeing the beginning of it. I expect it to get worse.
So we've heard about the problems, the issues within a manufacturing environment at different tiers in the supply chain. But, another vulnerable area is the transportation systems that link all these. As we've seen, one break in the transportation chain can screw up an entire supply chain. So are there vulnerabilities there, and where are they? Chris, I think this is a question for you too.
I think there are tremendous vulnerabilities in the logistics part of the supply chain. And let me just highlight two. One is we're already seeing a lot of attacks in our infrastructure systems, and that includes our railways and our shipping ports and everywhere else. So we run the risk of somebody shutting those things down, and that can wreak a lot of havoc. But to help you understand the value of the data that's flowing through those logistics organizations, there was a story, I think probably about 5 years ago, where one country had planted devices in our RFD scanners in a shipping port to gather data about what was passing through that shipping port. So that information is very valuable. So whether we run the risk of it being shut down or just somebody exfiltrating that data, yes, there is significant risk on the logistics side.
So Chris, recently I talked to a transportation expert who told me that he was going to look at an autonomous driving truck that runs from, the south all the way up to the north. And they've been running these trucks in a frequent basis. So does that make us more vulnerable if we have autonomous system generated drivers?
I think the good news is that in all the work on autonomous vehicles, my understanding is that they are so aware of the risks from cyber attacks that they are going to great lengths to make sure that those autonomous vehicles, whether they're commercial or for personal use, that those vehicles are safe and as well protected from cyber attacks as they can be.
Oh, thank you.
Well, we're running to the end of our time here, so I'd like to get your closing thoughts. So, Kenneth, what do you think is number one or two takeaways you can leave our audience with today?
Well, you catch up on your prayer time when you're CEO of a small business. The main thing is just, is always be, not necessarily paranoid, but hire people and make sure you have your systems set up, HR systems, whole 9 yards, and IT systems where you have the right people in place. You train them, and you also, everything you look at has cybersecurity's got to be taken into account. I've said many times, Industry 4.0 implemented in the DoD is only going to go far as cybersecurity will let it. The government needs to come up with some way to have an approved system that we can pass data in between machines, and that they will permit and approve for that secure type data. So there's a lot of things, and the CMMC can't get here soon enough far as we're concerned, because I think you're going to see another 10-15% of the suppliers that don't want to do it get out. And honestly, if they don't want to protect their customers' data, they do not need to be in the Department of Defense supply chain. That's just it. There's no non-negotiable, no negotiation. That's it.
Thank you. Chris?
I think one of the biggest issues that I keep stressing is the value of the small to medium-sized manufacturers that are part of every supply chain we have, commercial and defense. And the challenges that they have, these organizations that are small, don't have the resources, and can't necessarily address a lot of these issues. I think that we need different means to help them, whether it is the large suppliers helping their large companies helping their suppliers to get up to speed, whether it is a grand challenge by the government to develop solutions that they can implement at relatively low cost. But it's something all of them need to address. My concern in the defense industry is that research we have done has shown that the vast majority of companies, small to medium-sized companies in the defense industrial base, receive less than 20% of their revenue from defense. So if I've got 80% commercial market and 20% defense, and the burdens to do work with the Department of Defense keep increasing, chances are they're going to leave. It's just a common sense business decision. But we need those companies. Those companies produce items that are vital to our defense. We need to figure out a way to help them stay in the business, protect their data, and be there when we need them for national defense.
Well, thank you very much. Bill, any final thoughts from you?
I've become enlightened in terms of, how the supply chains work and how there's a differentiation between the smaller, medium-sized companies in the middle of the supply chain really have to rely on people in the end of the supply chain to kind of help them get that cybersecurity. And it also highlights how much risk we have. So I think those are the things that I'm taking away from this talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One
We've
thing,
long-
you know, I might add is that sequestration, you know, just helped destroy the supply chain. It hurt that. We could not survive another sequestration because those companies that did survive it and coming out of it, we're having to look at replacing, upgrading machine tools, and then also get our people, HR, get the human resources going, because so many people left, like in our case, the machine shops, in schools and trade schools, people quit going into it, or even schools even dropped it. So, you know, I've told my buddies many times and in speeches, you know, you can make a bureaucrat in about 3 months, but it takes about 5 years to make a machinist. So, you know, you got to keep this going. And what we saw during sequestration here was that for every 3 people that left, you maybe hired 2 or sometimes even 1. And then you did not invest in any equipment. That's what we've been doing the last several years. And then to add to it, you know, it's been documented the last decade, between 25 and 30% of the DoD suppliers left, either went out of business or quit doing work for the DoD. So it's, you know, it's a national security issue.
Well, excellent. Thank you very much, all of you, for all your thoughts. This has been very provocative, and I hope we can get together again sometime in maybe a few months and see if we're making any progress on some of these fronts. So thank you very much. I'm Bob Rossback, and have a great day.